Good morning, everyone. My name is Gustav Mikkelsen, and I would like to welcome you all to Nixu Cyber Coffee on Cybersecurity Roadmap. During this webinar, Nixu's CCO Jesper Svegby, together with our subject matter experts Niklas Chachalatos and Thomas Wong, will present and discuss Nixu's cybersecurity roadmap. Before we start to discuss cybersecurity roadmap, I just want to make you aware of that you can send us questions during the session through the question chat function that you see on this slide. We have reserved time in the end of this webinar to go through the questions that we received. So without no further ado, I will hand over to Jesper.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you've had a chance to get yourself a cup of coffee. So as Gustav mentioned, I'm the CCO, the Chief Commercial Officer of Nixu Group, meaning I deal with all sales, service packaging, and whatnot. So I will do the introduction of the cybersecurity roadmap, and then we'll switch over to the nitty-gritty details provided by Niklas and Thomas later on into the presentation. So first, I'm going to get into what we as cybersecurity professionals at times get blamed to, or get blamed by, rather. And there are 6 different factors that quite regularly pop up when I do work together with clients, and also being perceived myself. We'll see if you connect with what I'm aiming for here. So quite frequently, we're perceived as failing to connect, perceived as being in an ivory tower and not really engaged on the day-to-day business. So a lack of understanding from the rest of the business organization why cybersecurity is quite imperative to the ongoing effect of or efficiency of the day-to-day business. So standing in an ivory tower and not really relevant perhaps to the general business. And this is becoming more and more evident as digitalization moves forward. A lot of things happening to different organizations' offers or the way that they operate. So it's absolutely imperative that we as cybersecurity professionals are really engaged with the day-to-day business. And this is the cybersecurity roadmap might not fix all of these problems, but one thing it does fix is to connect the dots between the general business and the general business need in terms of cybersecurity and the people working dedicated with cybersecurity. Whether we're business relevant or not, are we providing the true value that the business needs in order to move towards more digitalization? And again, obviously today, with the fast transformation that we're seeing, partially, if not powered by, but at least accelerated by the pandemic that we're all needing to deal with on a day-to-day business or day-to-day basis. Moving forward, quite often we get blamed by having this new shiny things syndrome that some people call it, meaning procuring new tech for cybersecurity in order to deal with a specific issue. And what we're trying to provide with you here with the cybersecurity roadmap is more of a holistic view and deploy a strategy that will be supporting the organization long term rather than finding a solution or a quick fix to a dedicated problem, because most likely the issue at hand is mainly not a technology problem. Technology solves some of it, but people and process are maybe as important, if not more important, than the tech itself. And especially here in the Nordics, where we tend to be quite early adopters, which is positive, but we tend to get stuck on whether this or that technology can solve a certain threat, whether that is DDoS or more recently, the last couple of years, obviously ransomware, which has hit not only Sweden, where I'm based as of last week, with a lot of pinpoint attacks to large corporations, but also the last few weeks also in Finland with some devastating results for individuals as well, not only corporations. Wasted investments. We might procure something, a technology or a solution that might fix the problem short term, but what we fail to figure out is what the true cost of ownership of a certain investment will hold for the number of years that we're going to run it, whether it's 1, 2, or 3, because we fail to understand the complexity of running a certain technology. Maybe even the need might be 24/7. So how much does it cost to actually run a service internally based on a certain technology that we're procuring? And that also is relevant from a cybersecurity roadmap perspective, whether that is in line with what we actually need to invest in, which area, because not always do we understand where the gaps might be. From time to time, we're being blamed to not responding fast enough. The business is moving forward, typically at a very high pace, and we've seen quite many examples of that throughout the last year, especially when organizations are forced to enable remote work in an extent that hasn't been seen before, or taking their offerings into the digital space much sooner than they expected only last year. And obviously the strain on cybersecurity teams and responsibles, whether it's CISOs or CIOs, has been immense, and will most likely continue to do so for the next couple of months, if not a year. And then from time to time, we tend to be chasing a silver bullet that resolves all issues. And quite obviously, the silver bullet has never existed, and it most likely will never exist. So it's a mashup of a wide array of different capabilities that we need to saw together with people and processes to move forward. This is how we look at the market currently, and there are some changes due to the recent pandemic, obviously. And on the left-hand side, we see the trends in digitalized business, and they pretty much stay the same, but we've seen a massive acceleration since March, February this year, especially when it comes to remote work, but also driving our capabilities towards cloud computing. And in addition to that, we also have more regulatory compliance demands from different entities in our surrounding world. So that is the pressure that comes from the business side. And on the right-hand side, obviously, the evolving modern threats, and not a huge change there during this year. The corporate espionage still exists, industrial espionage, hybrid warfare, etc. Obviously, what has been accelerating and continues to do that is ransomware, which popped up on the radars a couple of years ago, but it's now being way more effective and more industrialized, if I may say so, when it comes to ransomware, with organized cybercrime in the back end of this. So in the middle, we have the pressure point where we see those challenges, and we're facing those challenges on a day-to-day business. How we allocate security spending in order to support the needed growth for the organization, whether it's a public or a private organization. And also, maybe more importantly, the last bullet, how do we determine where we should spend our efforts and our personnel? Where do we invest? Are we really certain that the entities that we spend time and effort on are actually closing the gaps that we have in our organization today? So the difference between the risk appetite and the cybersecurity posture. Moving into the organization as such, and we speak a lot about closing gaps, or bridging gaps rather. This is, my very simplistic way of looking at things with a few comments. I'm not going to go through all of them, but typically these different layers in our organization do not clearly communicate the way that we need them to. IT operations or IT security operations typically have a big challenge in trying to explain, even to a CISO, from a technical standpoint that is understandable, what are the current gaps, what are our current capabilities, what do we need? And the same goes for the same intel that moves up the chain or up into the layers of the CIO or the CFO. Why is a certain investment needed? And this is something that we're trying to address with the cybersecurity roadmap in order to bridge the gaps between those different layers, making sure that everyone understands on their specific area of interest or responsibility what is needed to be accomplished in order to be in line with the risk appetite that the board and the CEO has stated is acceptable, whether that is verbalized in terms of monetary loss for a certain period of time, month, quarter, year, whatever, so that we're sort of dancing the same pace in the organization when it comes to cybersecurity. A few comments on the risk appetite and our customers' journey. So quite often when we embark on providing a cybersecurity roadmap to a client, most clients do have a definition of the risk appetite, meaning what type of loss they're accepting to take. What is a problem here is that they're not really aware of what their current security posture might be, both from an organization but also from a technical standpoint. So the result of that is that they're carrying a significant risk exposure, which in itself can be okay as long as you're aware of it. The problem here is that there's an unknown in terms of the security posture, and that is in the end what will kill you or at least hurt you. So we're trying to manage that through the cybersecurity roadmap process, and when we take those outcomes into production or into operation, we'll get to a point further down the road where you run a managed security posture with a defined risk appetite and a known security posture. And the trick here is obviously to maintain that defined security posture over time, despite the changes and the rapid digitalization pace, etc. The alternative to that, trying to joke a little bit about it, it's a serious matter, but the alternative to that is to flip the coin every morning. And I think that is, dating back to the early 2000s when I started to work in cybersecurity, that was typically what you did. You flipped the coin in the morning, lucky or not, and there were attacks coming or different threats emerging, and you tried to resolve it in a defensive and reactive way. And this is our way to try to swap this around and to really define a strategy on not only how to deal with threats, but also be in line with the business needs of our organization. Before I switch over to Niklas and Thomas to give you more in-depth details of this process, I wanted to just spend 1 minute on what is offered on the market today. So typically, a lot of clients have done some type of assessment, and assessments can be there's a wide array of them. The most simplistic one is some type of penetration test, whether you do it on a perimeter, on your cloud, or on a specific web app or a smartphone app. That is one cybersecurity assessment, obviously. There are alternatives to that where you expand it further and you do a cybersecurity assessment over your entire organization through interviews and maybe even technology testing. So you test the perimeter, whether it can withstand a certain scenario, for instance. The problem we saw with that is that the report was great, typically, for the client. He or she could see all the gaps, but it didn't really state where they were in terms of where they should be. And in addition to that, they didn't get any angle on what they had to do in order to get out of the situation they were currently in, because most typically there were gaps. So how can the client close their gaps? And that is where we moved our cybersecurity assessment into what it is today, a cybersecurity roadmap. So you get the sort of audit capability, but you also get a mapped out roadmap. And that is what Niklas and Thomas will share with us for the next minutes. So I'll switch over to you guys.
Yeah, thanks, Jesper. Okay, what is a cybersecurity roadmap? Please go to the next slide. Okay, let's start to give you a highlight on what cybersecurity roadmap is. Nixu will deliver to you a 360-degree view of your maturity level in cybersecurity. That is based on international frameworks and practices. We also will create a roadmap. This will give a plan for all needed investments to close the gaps and reach your target. Cybersecurity roadmap lays the basis to be able to breach the IT operation and the C-level management to board of directors. The method we use is to analyze the customer's current state and the desired target level. Based on the identified observation, gaps, and the risk, the roadmap is created and outlined for you and your organization. So, what to do first and what kind of investments need to be done? Yeah, next slide.
Yeah, and thank you, Nicholas and Jesper. Now you explained why we need this and what we promise to do while we're doing it. So let's have a little talk about how we are going to do this. Basically, we see it as 3 building blocks. We see it as where are you right now? That is what we call the current state. And where do we want to be? That is the target state. And how do you get there? And that is the roadmap. That is to oversimplify it a lot, and we will dig deeper into it, how we're going to do this. But it is impossible to know where you want to be if you don't know where you are, and it's impossible to know where you are just based on what you need. So putting these things together will put you in a much better place. So we create the foundation for you to base your decisions on, and that's the better foundation, the better decisions. So let's try to dig into a little more deep, so we don't just say it's 3 things, it's a little more than that. Jesper, can I have you get the next slide? Yeah, thank you. As we can see here, when we have to do this kind of assessment, we have to use some kind of model, and we have to look into different areas. We have chosen, and we believe that these 6 areas are the correct ones to use. The numbers in the side where it says capabilities is an even finer definition of what is inside these areas and what you as a customer do in these kind of areas. Again, governance, how to govern cybersecurity, I think that's important, and that is something that hasn't existed like 10 years ago in most companies. To manage the cybersecurity processes is also one of the things that we need. Otherwise, as Jesper said, we're just going to flip a coin, right? If we don't have a fixed process, we cannot even, if something goes wrong, we cannot change anything because we don't even know how we are doing it right now. And then, of course, to protect the assets, it's also super important. And detection of the assets, again, certainly an area that a lot of companies is often have struggles with. Protection might not be big of a struggle. We know we need to protect, but we also need to detect, and then we need to respond to something, and how our capabilities in our ability to respond to threats. And again, so we need to come back from this. So these are the areas that we look into. We use a model from 1 to 5 in the different areas. But I think the next one is super interesting. The next slide where we actually dig into this. Yes. Again, these capabilities, if somebody counts, please remember this slide. There will be a quiz in the end. No, only joking, but these are the areas that we look into. And I believe that if you have to take the complete 360 view on a company, every decision that relates to IT security fits into some of this, from the processes down to the technical level and network security and locking. All this ties together, and it doesn't help to be weak in one and strong in one. And often when we go out to customers, and I'm sure Nicholas will agree with me on this one, is that you're often strong in one area and weak in another area, and there might even be areas you have overlooked completely. And that is where the cybersecurity roadmap really helps you, because it doesn't ask you how, not necessarily just how you're doing, but it actually goes into areas you might not even have considered. So when you're done all these areas, we will have a very deep understanding on what are your capabilities in all these areas. And what comes out of this, which is also important, is that every person that is related to cybersecurity in your organization will actually get a dive into their specific area, because the IT, the one that runs the backup, for example, might not be on the board of directors, and he needs a different view than the board of directors, but it's just equally important that they have the correct view and they have the correct information to actually base their decisions on and doing their job on. Yep. Let's take Nicholas, over to you.
Yep, that's mine. Okay, the process. Well, based on experience and lessons learned, Nixu has developed a playbook and tools for how to perform the assessment with high quality in an agile and efficient way. As you can see, each step is well defined with goals, workshops, activities, and deliverables. So we collect different data, have different data points that can be document reviews, workshops, interviews, and also data analysis, such as technical assessment or reports. So we build upon that data. The cybersecurity roadmap is run as a project. We put a project manager in charge with a team of security experts. That is, the expert group is ranged from advisory, security architects to a core technical expertise. So in other words, we give you a clear view on what needs to be done, how it will be performed and when, and it also gives you clarity who needs to be involved from your organization and in what level. Yeah, please, next slide. Okay, the deliverables. Let's here you can see the main parts of the assessment or the cybersecurity roadmap. We have the executive summary. Here is a high-level summary which works perfect for the C-level management. You have the whole assessment aggregated. Then we have the maturity chart showing the maturity level and the related risk for each capability, as Thomas mentioned earlier. We have the report. Here you can find all the assessment results with observations and also recommended activities or actions to be done. And finally, but not least, the roadmap. Here is the part which I think makes the difference from classic reviews and assessment. The roadmap is actually outlining the suggested development project and activities, so you can close the gaps and manage the risks. Okay, I think let's move on to the next one, Jesper. Thanks. Okay, the maturity overview. Here you can see the result from the assessment. All the result will be visualized and presented in different charts, as this one, the spider diagram. And for example, you can see the gaps in the maturity level here between the current state and the target level for this specific client. And it also shows that for all the capabilities that are in scope. Okay, then let's move on to the next one. Okay, creating the roadmap. Let's dig in 1 minute to show you what you actually will receive. The roadmap will state the necessary development project and activities to bridge the gap, as we mentioned, and also to manage the identified risks. All projects and activities are outlined in a suggested timeline, as you can see, and it also tagged with an estimated cost and effort. So what to do, in which order, and in what effort. And we also provide you for each suggested project and activities in the as we're showing you, we will have a description that includes the, as mentioned earlier, the estimated cost and the effort to implement the project, and also the security objects and the recommended actions. So now you can use the roadmap to budget and also to plan how to take it from here. Yep, next slide. Yeah, Thomas.
Yeah, thank you. And then the next few slides is also to sum it up. some of the upsides. There's also, of course, some pitfalls that we see inside organizations, even with the best intentions, and hopefully, or based on experience, the roadmap is something and that's going to eliminate these pitfalls. But one of the problems is often that it is difficult to anchor the result within the organization and have understanding of why we need to do this, because as Jesper started out by saying, is it doesn't really help if they don't speak the same language. If IT comes up with, we need this and this and this, and they do that with the best of intentions, but when it actually trickles up the chain, it just becomes they just want shiny new things. They don't put it into a perspective. What is the benefits of us guessing that? That's definitely some of the pitfall we see, and that also, of course, ties in with investing in wrong areas. You could say there's no wrong area, but I would say there's areas that is not optimal. We all have limited budgets, so we want more bang for our buck. We want to make sure that where we invest our resources actually have the desired outcome. Because you could even do something that gives you false security, saying, no, I did this, I will no longer be vulnerable to whatever it might be. Like back in the day, we had lots of ransom attacks. Some people just specialized in being able to recover, which is a good thing, of course, to be able to recover, but maybe they should have put a few resources into prevention also, so they don't have to recover every single morning. But some of the upsides, of course, and that is where I love the conversation that I'm having with the customers when we do this, is the insight. I love to get a peek into how customers do this, but also what I mean by insight is actually the customer's insight. So when you actually talk with all these people and you drill into all these areas, the insight that they get when you're done, but also doing the work, is immensely saying, now I understand why we are doing this. So that's this facilitating communication, because that is so important. There's not just one person in a company, you are the security guy. It has to tie together. There's still companies that try to actually do this where there's one guy, and it kind of fails because then you don't have the right support in the organization, and you don't know what way you're doing, what way you're going to do or go. And that's, again, this holistic view on cybersecurity. Today, the threat picture out there is so big that you need very specific competences to actually understand the threat picture and relate that to your company. It's a very difficult process to do single-handedly, and that's where this roadmap helps you to, again, understand where you are and where you should be and how to get there. I think these are the things that we need to understand, and I think everybody I know that works in security sometimes are like, I don't even know where we are, and know even less where we should be, and that is definitely how we should get. We will cover in this. So if you have some of the same pains, I think this could be the right one. But again, to sum it up, if you don't have these understandings, your investments might not give you the optimal outcome. I think that's one of the sad thing, is if we spend a lot and then we don't get the desired value out of it. That's just sad. We all know that from our private lives also. Let's look into the next one. Yeah, bridging the gap. You could say, again, as I've talked about a few times, these 3 steps: where are we, where do we want to be, and how do we get there? But there's even more bridging the gap. It's also even from the current state to where we want to be, but it's also from the roadmap and to actually put this into our process. When you know when you're going, where you want to be and how to get there, there's still a process. It's not a magic that you just there overnight. And that's also something that we help customers with, bridging the gap and the journey, so to speak, from where they are and where they want to be, and then keep on top of that again. And it could also be some of the gaps that we also see is actually maybe a more for outsourcing gap. How do we actually get from where we are? Let's move into the cloud. The gap we have there in our understanding of security, because we maybe have a traditional understanding of security, because normally we have it inside our walls, and now we're putting it all out all out in the internet. So it's a different world. It's not worse, it's not better, it's just different, and we need to understand how to approach this differently. And that's some of the knowledge gap that this also closes. Let's have another slide. Again, the development program. So I want to go back a little and say, when does the roadmap make sense to do? We of course would say it always makes sense to do, but if you don't, it could be places like you get a new CISO, you change your strategy, you evolve your business, you go into new areas, you don't wake up in the morning and have complete understanding where you are. You could say that it helps you sleep better at night, at least in the long run. So if you have some of these pains, this is definitely where this fits in. And I think Jesper in his slides even explained it even better, why we need this and what the problems are out there. But they only become worse as we get more and more dependent on IT. And then when we have to do it and put it into a development program, it is super important that this also are prioritized and it's kept on top of. And of course, we can also help with that. So just reach out if you need that kind of help. But it doesn't, if you know where you are and you know how to get there, you still need to do the journey, so to speak. And that sometimes it helps having somebody who doesn't do anything else than cybersecurity to be your partner on this journey. And that's definitely something I know both me and our colleagues and Niklas love to do. So please reach out if that's something you want. So I'll just, at least from my side, say, if you need anything, just reach out. We love cybersecurity. That's what makes us happy in the morning. So if you want to have a talk about that, I'm sure all of my colleagues are happy to do it. And if you want to talk with me, please reach out to me. I will love to talk about it, and specifically also the roadmap. Yeah.
Thanks, Thomas. So time for Q&A. Let's see if we received some questions here. We have a few of them. So first one, I will read it up loud, and then you will have to help me answering them then. What is the timeline? How long are you gonna spend on doing this?
Niklas?
Yeah, I can answer that. It usually goes from 4 to 6 weeks calendar time. So it's quite a smooth process. We have trimmed that, so I would say around 4 to 6 weeks. It's very based also. Yeah, sorry, Jesper, go ahead.
No, I wanted to comment on that as well, and there are a couple of parameters that will have an impact on the length of the project, and one of the things that we've seen is whether the organization is geographically spread out, meaning that we have different interviewees in different time zones, for instance. That could have an impact not on the workload as such, but on the calendar time, just booking the meetings and stuff. The other parameter is to what extent we're going to do technology or penetration testing, basically, which is one point where this service is sticking out a bit compared to some other services that are already out there. Equally good, but we tend to do some technology testing as well to make sure that we understand what the system perspective might be on cybersecurity levels, and not only base it on interviews, which from time to time can be opinionated, knowingly or unknowingly. So yeah.
No, I agree. Good. Well said, Jesper. It's based on how many interview objects we have, where they are spread in globally, and also I will say that also the access we have to the organization. If they are accessible, those roles which are pointed.
Yeah, and I think I just want to add a little comment to what Jesper said about this technology testing. And I think from my experience, what I sometimes experience is that when we have these dialogues, they have some kind of technology or some kind of software that does something great, and it's it's a cornerstone in their security, but it actually, they believe that it might do even more than it actually does. So they're saying, yeah, but we are fine in this specific area. And then when you drill into it, they may not be as fine in this area because it doesn't do, let's say, sandboxing or whatever it is. It's just an example, but they have sometimes that they think the protection, if it's a protection thing, is even greater than it is. Not that it's bad, but it just may not cover as many bases as they believe. So that's a gap. But if you ask them solely interview based, they would say, we don't have a problem in these areas because we are covered, we are good, and it works. But it might not, if we actually drill down to the specific technology, it might not work that specific way. It's not set up yet, or it is, maybe it's not enabled or something like that. So I think that's why it's important also to look into the technology while you're doing this.
No, I agree. Yeah. You can find the blind spots, so to say. And also the combination from interviews, also the security architect reviews combined with the core technical pen testing. This combination makes the 360-degree view, I would say.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, let's move on to the next one. So who in the company need to be involved in the cybersecurity roadmap?
Good question. You have definitely those which is responsible for the different areas. So we sit down and see which kind of roles for the specific organization need to be involved. And that is, as you saw, the different capabilities that Thomas showed you. We see which roles needs to be, so we cover those, which is in the scope. And it's usually the CISO, it's usually those responsible for the technical areas, and different IT operation teams.
Yeah. Great.
Yes. You want to add something, Jesper?
Yeah, we more and more we also interview different business owners to make sure that we're relevant, as I tried to state in the first couple of slides, to make sure that whatever we produce in terms of the roadmap will be business relevant moving forward. So trying to mitigate the gap or bridge the gap, as the beautiful picture showed, bridge the gap between the supporting organization, security being, at least from my perspective, being one of them. How can we support the business moving forward? Because obviously, if the business is looking to deploy 50,000 iPads in physical stores to run cash registers or whatever it might be, it's relevant, highly relevant even from time to time, to make sure that cybersecurity is a part of that program, because otherwise you're going to fail from a PCI DSS perspective or whatever it might be. So give the cybersecurity team of the CISO or whomever holds title to this an ability to act in a proactive way, rather than getting a request 2 weeks prior to deployment. Hey, can you please sign off on this? And by that time, it's pretty much, you know, putting your head into the noose and just wait for someone to yank it. You're being taken hostage, and that's, I think, too many CISOs and other cybersecurity responsible people have been experiencing over the past couple of years, that the wheels are spinning so fast that we don't have an ability to act in a proactive manner. So we try to use different types of bolt-on security to mitigate whatever, you know, the biggest gaps that we see when deployments are so rapid. So definitely different types of business owners are a subject for those interviews as well.
Yeah. I totally agree. And the business perspective is very important to understand where the organization is actually aiming the target level, because usually the business is setting that target.
Yeah, and also understanding, have a dialogue with people to actually know what the strategy is for the specific customer, because their company, because or organization, because let's say that you are based in a specific country and that's your risk matrix at the current moment, but they know that they have a strategy of buying up to be in 50 countries in the next year, just to, that would be aggressive growth. But let's say that was the case, then of course where they're going to need to be a little different than much more different where they would be if they only stayed in the same country. So depending on how the organization is also evolving and how they believe that it should evolve based on their business strategies, that's also something that is important to understand and have a dialogue about, to actually make sure that the roadmap takes them, facilitates that journey that they're going into. So that's something that sometimes are missed if you just, look at this from a purely technology standpoint. Is today the company is the same as yesterday, and that's not the truth of any company. But some companies are changing more rapidly than others, and that's something that we need to take into account. But we need, of course, this information to do so. Yep.
Okay, thank you, guys. So let's move on to what we call next step. Thanks, Jesper. So if you would like to have more information and insight about cybersecurity roadmap, I recommend you to visit nixu.com/cybersecurity-roadmap. And here you will get access to a report from Gartner and learn how to bridge the gap between security organization and governance. And you can also read our latest blog post on situations where a cybersecurity roadmap is crucial. If you move on to next slide, Jesper. I will also like to inform you on the upcoming Nixu webinars this fall. Registration links to these webinars will be available on our website, nixu.com, and also in a follow-up email sent to you tomorrow morning. In the email, you will also have the full recording of this webinar. And thank you for participating. And if you have any questions or comments in this survey, you can add those, and we'll reach out to you as soon as possible. So thank you, everybody, from my side. Guys, do you have anything you would like to add?
No, I'm good.
I'm good. I'm out of coffee as well, so good timing.
Yeah, no, thanks for listening.
Definitely.
Yeah, and have a good day.